Alrighty, welcome back everybody. It's week 7. Let's get started. Alrighty, so we're going to keep going this week. As usual, we're going to continue learning more HTML and CSS. We're going to learn some more fun stuff today. One of my favorite stuff to talk about, we're going to talk about fonts today and something called the position property. On your assignment, you're going to be, for your lab, you're going to be creating this image puzzle. Let's take a look at this real quick. There we go. Looks a little interesting, a little bit different than what we usually do, right? Oh, let it load. A little different than what we usually do, right? So far we've only been concerned about like putting things left to right, top to bottom, like vertically, horizontally, right? We cared about like rows and columns and divs, but this one looks a little bit interesting, right? Now take a look at this. Now we're like putting things on top of things. We're putting like this picture on top of this picture here. Take a look at the assignment. We're gonna do doing something with the same with the assignment. You're gonna be let's let it load a little bit here. You're going to continue working on that same page you were working on. And take a look at this. Zoom in on this a little bit. So that photo gallery you were working on last week, we're going to add to it. Now you're going to finally add some pictures into each of the divs you created. And take a look at this. So we talked about hover effects before. We're going to continue with hover effects a little bit too. Take a look at this. So when I hover over the picture, we're going to see you can actually kind of see the picture still, right? It's a little bit transparent here. But every time I hover over the picture, we're going to see the caption of the picture. But the caption of the picture is going to be on top of the picture. Does that make sense? Now we're talking about not this not just like X, Y axis. We're not talking about like top to bottom, left to right. Now we're literally talking about the Z index, if you will, like putting things on top of something. Like we're layering things on top of another, which we haven't done yet. And we're going to be able to do this kind of like putting things on top of other things by using something called position. So this position property is really crucial. The position here, this position property is really crucial. Using this, and it's still CSS. So we're not, talking about something crazy here. Within CSS, we can use this position property to put things on top of other things. So whether it's putting pictures on, like the lab, where we put pictures on top of other pictures, or it's like the assignment where we put like words or other divs on top of other divs. So we're gonna be talking about that. And then so in today's lecture, which we'll come back to in a minute, I'll kind of show you something like this where. There you go. When I hover over, notice how I have like this overlay kind of thing going on top. Right? I'm showing this like thing on top. And what this is, and we're going to break this down a little bit, but whenever I do this, and I'm sure you see these kind of effects all the time, whenever I do this, what it's doing is I have a div here with an image, and I have a second div that appears on top of my image when I hover. Right? So we're going to be talking about, again, putting things on top of other things. And notice my menu here, the nav bar up here. Notice how as I scroll, it's going on top of, it's covering all my other stuff, right? It's like kind of following me, and it's covering all the things behind it. Notice how it's like this, again, it's like its own, like, it's its own layer almost, its own like Z index. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. That's like our key thing today, the position property. Very useful when you want to create effects like this, when you want to put stuff on top of other stuff. Very, very important. And then something more fun, more lighthearted. We're going to talk about fonts today as well. So let's first talk about fonts, and then we'll go back into the position, right? So believe it or not, fonts make a huge difference on your website. When you first create a website, you typically think like, okay, what colors am I going to choose? Like what pictures, what logos, and you might not think of fonts being the first thing to choose. However, actually, fonts make a huge deal on your website. It really defines what your website is about. I'm not a typography expert. Actually, I think in the art school, in the Roski art school, there's like a class. There's many classes on typography. So I'm not an expert on typography, but I will give you my little my 101 on how fonts kind of work. so that when you on your website, when you want to add your own fonts on your website, you kind of have an idea of what you want to do, what fonts you want to use. So there's in the realm of the web, at least, there's 5 popular web typefaces. These are, we call the serif, sans serif, monospace, cursive, and another big category called decorative fonts. You might have seen these kind of fonts before, whether it's a website or probably on a website. So these are the 5 like big categories, the big font families, like the general font families in the web. Key thing between a serif versus a sans serif typeface is a typical serif font is like Times New Roman, where a sans serif is like Arial. And the big difference, honestly, is just that we call these serif fonts because they have these little, these serifs, these little tails, as you can see here, like these little tails here, right? And then sans serif, that means it does not have those tails. It does not have those tails. Those like straight fonts, like Arial, Helvetica, for example, those are sans serif fonts. I just want to emphasize how, and these, picking a serif font versus a sans serif font makes a huge difference, even though it seems kind of trivial. Did I start recording this? Okay. Even though it seems kind of trivial, these make a huge difference. Oh yeah, I'm recording this. Great. Because if you use a serif font on your website versus using a sans serif font on your website, it does a great. It really sets the tone and the vibe of your website. What I mean by this is, when Google, like around the first time it first came out, around 2013 to 2015, this was their logo. It looks like a serif font, right? And a couple years later, they decided that they wanted to change their logo, and they spent a ton of money, probably millions. Okay, maybe not millions, but a lot of money. And they decided, we're gonna come up with a new logo, and this is what they changed it to. Basically the same thing, same colors and everything, except that now they've changed it from a serif font to a sans serif font. That was a big difference, and they poured a lot of money into this. And the reason behind this, again, is because there's a different vibe. You get a different vibe, right? Like, this kind of Google feels a little bit more formal, a little more official, like, kind of thing, whereas Google was like, no, we want to keep it very friendly, like, public, very, like, that's the vibe we want, or the mood we want to, like, set when people visit our website. We want to be more friendly. So that serif versus sans serif does make those little tails do make a huge difference. I forgot to put my slide in here, but another example, if any of you use Slack before, Slack, it's a messenger app, or not a messenger app, but people use it as messenger. And Slack went the opposite. When they first came out, they were all about like sans serif. They want to be all friendly and like appealing to the younger generation and blah blah blah. But then over time, they wanted Slack. They wanted the big corporations, the Fortune 100s, to start using Slack as well. So they went the opposite way. They actually rebranded from going from sans serif to serif, so that they can kind of target the enterprise, the bigger fish in America. So they kind of went the opposite way. So depending on what your audience is, what you're trying to do with the product, people switch back and forth from serif and sans serif. So even for your website, I know final project is there's a long way. Selecting your font really makes a big difference when it comes to branding and on your website. That's why I want to kind of start talking about this. And then, so that's sans serif versus serif. Monospace types are, all that means is, you typically see this in like a lot of the coding when you're like programming or writing code. You see this font a lot. Monospace simply means that each letter is all the same width. So in reality, if you think about it, the letter I is super skinny compared to like the letter O, right? O is like really fat. By default, all these letters have different widths. But monospace type fonts, they took care of this. They make every single letter have the exact same width, so that it's easy to quickly count like how many letters there are. So typically in like Sublime uses a monospace font, right? So typically when you see a lot of code, people tend to use monospace typeface, just so that they can make sure every letter is the same. They can quickly check like how long the code is and things like that. So okay, great. Just my spiel on Font 101, Typography 101. How do we do this on the web? there's a lovely property called font family, right? And using font family, we can specify what kind of font we want to use. And there's actually, it looks something like this. It's actually kind of long, as you can kind of see. So there's a font family. Maybe you've used it before. Notice how they're separated by commas. These typically indicate the choices. So a little bit of history on this. For the longest time, it was actually really difficult to add any custom fonts on your website. I know it's hard to believe now, but back in the day, if you wanted to pick a font, it's probably you're very limited with like a few choices of like Times New Roman, Arial. You could even use Helvetica back in the day and on your website. You were like limited to these like 5 or 6 or like less than a dozen font families. But more thankfully, in 2020, now you can add all kinds of fonts on your website. But to support some other browsers that still don't let you add extra fonts, they gave this kind of solution here. We call this like a fallback solution. So whenever you whenever you add a font to your website, this is the first choice. Okay, so let's Open Sans. But let's say for whatever reason your browser doesn't support Open Sans font, or I don't know, something went wrong, or something happens, you can't load Open Sans, it'll go to the second choice, which is Arial. And Arial is a safe backup choice because, well, all the computers just come with Arial anyway. And then lastly, the third choice is sans serif, which is like, to be extra safe, you typically leave like a generic name. So let's say that for whatever reason the browser can't load Arial on someone's website, then they could just pick any sans serif font from that the computer can handle, the browser can handle. So this is like a typical way we like to write font families to indicate like, okay, this is the first choice. If the first choice fails, use the second choice. Second choice fails, use the third choice, so on and so forth. Yeah.
So there's an issue on the website, like the slide for this lecture is the last lecture.
Oh, it is? It's the wrong one? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, like for this one? Is this the wrong one? Oh, okay. I'll fix it. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll go ahead and fix that up. For now, let's follow this along. Yeah. And so, yeah. So that's how you can, that's how you declare a font for it. Like if you do body, by the way, that means my entire browser uses font. Okay. And then there's also this nice font face rule. If you, again, for the longest time, you couldn't add custom fonts to your computer. But now we can add whatever font we want on our browser. If you own that font file that you want to use, if there's like a really pretty font you like, and you own that font file, just like how like with images, you can own like your images, right? You could use this weird, this looks kind of weird, but this @ sign here will allow you to add your own font. So you would declare a font like this, and notice this SRC here, SRC, just like we've seen SRC everywhere else. Using SRC, we can tell exactly where that font file lives. So if you own the font file, you can use it on your website using this font face rule. So we'll try this out as well. Okay. Yeah, let's try this out. Let's just go ahead and try out fonts because fonts are kind of fun. Let's open up today's lecture notes and let's hope the Dropbox is correct. Lecture 7. Okay, look, that looks good. All right, go ahead and download it. Let's go ahead and download our starter code here, and let's in our typical, our usual, wherever you're saving your stuff. I'm going to save it in lecture ITP 104. There we go. Desktop ITP 104, lecture 7. Okay, there we go. By the way, while we're doing this, don't forget your attendance. It's 8946, 8946 on Blackboard. Okay, and so once you have downloaded the starter code, we're going to lecture 7 now. This is fonts position. I'm going to double tap. I'm going to open up lecture.html. Let's take a look at this. All right, it looks like just a bunch of words for now, and we're going to go ahead and fix this up. Okay, let's go and open up our Sublime text as well. Whoa, I have a lot of stuff going on here. I'm going to simply drag and drop that lecture.html into Sublime. And now we have lecture.html. I'm going to open this in my browser. There we go. Just to double check here. Alright, so as you can see, by default, this is like the Times New Roman font. This is probably the most common font in the whole world. Times New Roman. And now I want to spruce this up. I want to change the font. I want to make it prettier. I want to make it Arial, so on and so forth, right? So we can do that easily by, like, for example, like this is my style sheet here. Let's just continue, or let's just do it up here. Body. So body selects my entire browser. So anytime I want to set a different font, I would simply do font family, and then let's say like so what we talked about was like Arial, right? Arial, and then comma, and then sans serif, and what that's gonna do is it's going to change my entire browser's font to Arial, and then this is the like the fallback. If for whatever reason my computer or whoever is seeing my website, if Arial doesn't work for them, or if they don't have Arial or something, we're saying then this is the fallback solution. This is the backup option. Look for a sans serif font, and then go ahead and put that in my page. I'm gonna go ahead and save, refresh, and then now everything is Arial, right? I think we've seen this kind of done already, but I'm kind of giving you a refresher here. All right, so this is great, but Arial again is kind of built into everybody's computer nowadays. So Arial is Arial. What if I want to put my own custom font? Like, can I put like a cute little font or a cursive font, right? In 2020, and I say in 2020 because every year new technologies come about and new things come about. But as of right now, as of February 25th, 2020, there are two very easy ways to get any font you'd like. Choice number one, let's all go to fonts.google.com. Google provides a lot of stuff for us that are great for us to use. One of them is fonts. And all of these fonts are free. There's no copyright issues. You don't have to pay a license. There's no these are all just free. Amazing, right? Just Google just provides it for you. And take a look at this. There's like 980 fonts to choose from. And it used to be they only had like a few fonts. Now there's so many. And there's so many of these different fonts, right? There's like, there's like this one kind of looks like Arial. This one's a little bit more decorative, right? There's like so many different fonts here. Let's go ahead and let's go pick one. Yeah, let's pick one. So just kind of scroll down, pick whatever speaks to you, I guess. We're just gonna pick one and try it out. Okay, I'm gonna pick this weird one here. No, actually, no. I want to pick a more normal one actually for this one. Wow, I kind of don't like any of them. All right, okay, fine. I'm gonna do that one. This cursive one. Ooh, I actually kind of like this one. I'm gonna do this one, lobster. Right? Let's go this. I'm gonna pick this one. Again, pick whatever you want to pick, and what you're gonna do is click on this little plus icon right here, and then like Google is gonna give you this little thing here, this little pop up on the side, and it's gonna tell you exactly. Again, another reason why Google is so awesome sometimes is with Google Fonts at least is they give you the code for it. Okay, they're saying, all right, copy this. All right, I'm just gonna read the instructions here. Copy this into the head of your HTML document. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's copy this. Go over my Sublime, and they said put it in the head. So I'm just gonna put it like right here, maybe after my title tag or something. I'm gonna paste that in. All right, there we go. Okay, I'm gonna save this. Right, if I save this and I refresh right now, nothing actually happens yet because this one piece of code, all it did is so far it brought in the Google font and it put it into my web page. I haven't actually used it yet. All right, and this look kind of familiar. This actually kind of looks like an external style sheet. Anyway, all right, and then let's what's the next instruction? It says, okay, specify in CSS. Use the following CSS rules to specify these families. Alright, so now I have to choose what I want to change it as. So for example, let's take a look at this. I gotta pick something. Oh, H1, alright. My H1 is fonts position property. Okay, that's my H1. Alright, so I'm gonna just put that here, H1, right? H1. And I'm gonna say font family, lobster. I think that's what they told me to write. Oh, okay, lobster, comma, Yeah, and then we should probably put like this is more like a serif font. What our backup can be like Times New Roman, and then our third backup can be just a serif font, for example. Okay, pick lop. So let's go ahead and try that out. Now that I specified it in my CSS, just like this. Okay, and then I this is my Google here. Let me go and add this. Okay. Right now, if I refresh here, woohoo! Yay! Now we have the lobster font. Awesome. Yeah, that was pretty easy, right? Because this is not coming from my computer. I'm just using Google's. Any questions? By the way, with Google, you can actually pick more than one. If you want to use like this one and this one and this one, they'll give you a different code for that. But as you can kind of see here, it says like load time moderate. Typically, you don't really want to use more than 3 fonts, really, for many reasons. Reason number one, if you have too many different fonts in your website, it just gets a little crazy, right? Everything like you don't like this. It's the organization. It's just too hard to read everything. Second reason for not using more than 3 fonts is the more fonts you add, that's extra files you have to load into your website. And then if you get too many files running you're adding to your website, the website starts getting really slow. So you want to watch out for that. Typically you want to use 2 fonts, 3 at most. Very rarely do we use more than 3. What else is going on here? Another thing going on here, there we go. Okay. All right, awesome. That's easy to add, right? Awesome. Okay, cool. So Google Fonts is great. So for your own assignments or for your own websites, you can easily add fonts using Google Font like this. However, there's one downside of using Google Fonts. One downside, actually there's many downsides. Okay, well, there's a lot of pros. Pro is it's really easy to use Google Font. However, unfortunately, Google Fonts, there's a big downside to it is you are limited to only, I know 980 is a lot of fonts, but you are limited to their set of fonts. Like if you don't find a font that you really like, that's it. You can't, there's no other fonts available for you. So that's one big downfall. Second issue here though also is these are all owned by Google and they're all hosted by Google. So if one day, I don't think Google would ever do this, but if one day Google's like, hey, we're not making enough money with our ads, we need to charge people for fonts now. Again, they'll never do that. I really doubt they'll do that because they have so much money. But let's say if they do decide to change your mind about this and start charging you, they can. Like, you're totally at their mercy. This is all Google's stuff. Or if Google decides one day to shut down their service and they don't want to support fonts anymore, then you've totally, you've lost. You lose that as well, right? So there's always pros and cons when you're using other people's stuff. So watch out for that. So to combat that, how do we go about that? What if we do want to not rely on Google and then also I want to pick my own font? We can totally do that. That's thanks to with this font face rule. We can also add our own fonts as long as we own the file. So let's try that out as well. There's another useful website. There's a lot of websites out there that have like fonts and stuff. This is one of my favorites. This is dafonts.com, DAFONT.com. And people upload their font files here, and as you can see, they're a lot more creative and there's a lot more different ones in this website here. But you gotta watch out for these. Some of the fonts though, these aren't all by default all license free, royalty free fonts. These are some of them say like for educational or personal use, it's free. But if you're gonna put it on your business website, you gotta pay for a license. So you do have to read the fine print. But since we're in a classroom, so we can pretty much use any of these. Let's go pick another one. I'm gonna pick another font for maybe my headings here, my heading 2 here. Let's pick. I'll pick Sultan. Kind of looks kind of interesting. Sultan here. All right. Oh, actually, maybe this one. I'll pick this one just for fun. It looks interesting. wait, no, I already have a cursive font. Actually, no, I'm going to pick Sultan. Okay, wait, change my mind. It says free for personal use. That's great. That's us. I'm going to download this. And let's download this in lecture number 7. I'll just pop that right in there. And lecture number 7, there we go. We have sultan.otf. Alright, so just like how images have their own like file type names, you know, like JPG, JPEG, right, GIF, GIF. Fonts have their own file names as well. OTF is one of them. There's TTF. There's WOFF. There's quite a few out there, but the most common ones are OTF and TTF. And as you can see, this is my lovely font file here. Awesome. All right, so as long as I own this font file, I can add it to my website. Notice how my OTF, everything's living in the same folder right now. I have lecture.html. I have sultan.otf. They're all living in the same folder. And so because they live in the same folder, I can now go ahead and do something like this. I like to do it at the very top of my style sheet here, just because like this is like the first thing that loads. So I want to say font face, font face, and then this is where I'm going to, let me write some comments here. This is where I'm going to kind of like load in the custom font file. Okay, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say font family. And this is where I kind of name my font. I'm just going to call it like Sultan, I guess. I'm just going to keep it the same. And then src, this is the URL, like where does this font live? My font's going to live in this lecture.html here. They're in the same folder again. Same folder again. So because they're in the same folder, I'll just do sultan.otf. Save and save and save. Okay, so this, just by simply doing this doesn't do anything. If I refresh right now, none of my fonts change or anything like that. So that font face thing here, I know we've never, that little app thing right there, that simply loads in my font file. I'm not actually, I haven't actually, what's the word? I haven't actually changed any of my text into that font. I'm simply loading that font file in here. Okay, all right. Hopefully it loaded in. I don't know. I'm not sure if it really did. And let's go ahead and create a CSS rule about it, like H2, let's say. I'm going to do font family Sultan. Okay, let's do file save. All right, let's refresh. Ooh, all right. Notice how my H2, is changed. H2 here, H2 here. Oh, interesting. Kind of a weird combination of different fonts, but you get the idea. You can add, so kind of recapping what I just did here, you can add fonts using Google Fonts like this, or you could add fonts using FontFace. If you own that specific font file, you can load it in FontFace. So actually, because I don't want to, in my own projects, because I don't like to rely on Google that much, actually, I typically go this route a lot. But for your projects, for whatever you're doing, for this class at least, Google Fonts is fine. And just another tip, like when I work on real projects with designers and people, fonts can get really expensive really fast, especially for web. Like there's like a web license usually. So whenever I work with a designer, I say, hey, can you just pick a font from Google Fonts? That will just make our life easier. And then that's how I typically work with designers. Unless if there's a really specific font that we gotta worry about licensing and costs, but anyway, this is kind of how we do it in the real world, I guess. Any questions about fonts? Straightforward. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, sure. I just saved it in the same like folder as the starter code. Yeah, they're on the same. So a lot of times like I could have like created a folder just for fonts, and then I could have put my font in there. Yeah.
Is there a difference between like whatever the font name is, .otf, .ttf? Mine's .ttf, it doesn't seem to work.
TTF is it's like kind of like JPEG versus PNG.
Okay.
So if you did if it says TTF and you put TTF there, it should work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions about fonts before we move on to the next topic? Honestly, sometimes the hardest thing about fonts for me is not like putting it on, is picking a good font. Sometimes I probably spend way too much time picking like a font I really want. But otherwise, at least once you pick a font, once you have a font you like, at least code-wise, it's pretty straightforward to just add it in using font face, and then everything else is like your typical CSS stuff. Any questions? All right. So that's font face for you. Fonts for you. Let's talk about positions. All right, back to our, this is like the core top. This is a very meaty topic, or a very important topic. Not meaty, meaty is the wrong word. It's a very important topic because we use this so much. And whenever you go, when you see a website, most likely they're using positions somewhere. And like I mentioned, position is very useful for things like this, like that we're going to be doing today, where when I like hover over something, like whenever you want to put something on top of something like this, you need to have position. Right? Like that's like the only way you can create effects like this. And these kind of effects are super common these days on the web, so that's why it's so important. Again, so we so far we got really good at putting things like top to bottom, right? And we learned how to use floats to put things left to right, right? Like we talked about floats a lot to put things left to right. So the third thing we got to learn is now how to put things on top of each other. Again, like if you like my math analogy, it's like the z-index, right? We have the y-axis, x-axis. Now we got to worry about the z-axis. If you're used to using like Photoshop or Illustrator, any of the graphic tools, think of it as like we're creating layers on top of layers, or creating extra layers on top of things. That's another way to think about it. So let's talk about how we do stuff like this, how to add layers. Okay, these are we're going to do position, and these are the 4 options you could add as a position. You could have a static position, you could have an element, an HTML element can have a static position, a relative position, a fixed position, or an absolute position. So it's going to be one of these 4. By default, all the elements has a static position. Now, when you want to start putting stuff on top of each other, you got to choose one of the 3. There's relative, fixed, and absolute. So this is the default position. Let's take a look at position relative. What position relative does is, so we're going to do relative, fixed, and absolute. Okay. So there's some slides here, but honestly for me, I think let's go try some of these positions out. I think that's the best way to, because positions are extremely visual, so we got to kind of like visualize this. If you scroll up to the starter code today, oh, that's not my starter code. Let me close my fonts here. If you scroll up to scroll a little bit to the lecture code from today, you see how there's like an orange one, a red one, and a green one. And notice what it says is like I'm a relative div, absolute div, and fixed div. Let's scroll down in our code a little bit. Notice where it says like positions 101. All right. So relative div is this is my relative div here. Let's scroll down a little bit here as well. They're simply divs. They're not anything special. My relative div, my div with the ID relative div is like this orange div here. Right below it is a div called absolute div with an ID absolute div. It's like red right here. And then right below it is fixed div, and it's green right here. So there's 3 different types of, I just have 3 divs on top of each other. By default, divs, as we talked about, by default, divs like to stack on top of each other from top to bottom. That's like a very typical behavior of divs. Okay. All right, let's go back to my CSS here, my position. All right, I'm going to give my relative div a position. So by default, all the elements, every single div or any kind of tag has a position static. But I'm going to change this now to position relative. And the moment I do that, the moment I set my positions, the position property, and the value becomes relative, now I can do kind of odd stuff like this. I could specify a top position, and as well as a left position. I'm picking totally random numbers here right now. The numbers are totally just random. I'm just picking some numbers. And let's see what the heck just happens here. I'm going to refresh. Whoa, what just happened? I like it. A couple things happened. First of all, it moved. That's one thing. Second of all, I moved it, but it's also on top of all my other divs. Alright, so now I've created its own layer, its own z-axis, if you will. Using these position properties, you can move them around, as well as now, like, they're on its own thing now, and it's going to cover everything behind it. So this position allows you to cover things, allows an element to cover things behind it. And there's you can go crazy here. You can do, like, top, like, 100 even, and then now go, like, there, right? So what relative does, this is my relative div. This was a default position right over here, right? So it's saying from the default position, move the top, right? Move the top 100 pixels down, like move it down here. So create this like space on the top, 100 pixels. Create space on its left, 50 pixels, like that. So it kind of moves it there. You could do top left. You could even do bottom instead if you want to create some spacing on the bottom. There it is. Like it's creating. So it used to be here. It created space on the bottom of it. So you could do top or bottom. You gotta choose one though. Top or bottom, and then you could also choose left or right. So that's relative for you. And notice how everything else though it's kind of the same. Like the width stays the same and everything. Relative just allows you to move things however you like, and it lets you put stuff on top of other things. And I want to emphasize here, some people get too excited about positions and they want to use positions for everything. But I want to caution you a little bit here. Positions, once you start playing around with positions, they get a little hard to organize because now you're going to have all these things on top of each other. So use positions sparingly. You still want to use divs like normally, use floats normally. Only when you have to put something on top of something else, then you use position, okay? So you don't use position for everything. Position is not your default. Okay, position is only the elements you want to put on top of something, then you use position. So, all right, so that's relative for you. Let's take a look at absolute. Take a look at that red one right there, the red one. All right, it's a div. Okay, it's a typical box. I'm going to add position on it, and I'm going to add position, this time absolute. Oh, no, let's take a look. Absolute is kind of a interesting position. It's a bit rebellious. Whoa, what the heck just happened? All right, absolute divs are rebellious. Absolute divs, look at the width already. The width just became just, you know how divs by default, they stretch really wide, but absolute divs right away, they just like shrink into the width of its contents here. And same thing with absolute here. And notice how the red one is on top of green now. If I do top, I'm going to just do top 0 pixels and like left like 100 pixels. Again, I'm picking totally random numbers. Let's take a look at what happens here. If I save this right now, oh, where the heck did it go, right? Actually, it's all the way, oh, there it is. It's all the way up there. What the heck, right? What does that tell you? So absolute div is different. Absolute is a, again, I call like, absolute divs are rebellious, okay? Very rebellious elements, because they do a couple things. First of all, the width shrinks to the contents inside it. Okay, and then also too, that top left thing that we just saw, what it does is it positions in relation to the browser. Okay, so unlike relative div, very well behaved relative div, it just moves from the default position was here and it moved down here, right? Like that's how it kind of moved. Absolute div doesn't care about where it used to be, doesn't care about its roots, doesn't care about its house, I guess. It's only going to follow wherever the browser is. So if I do top 0, left 0, it's going to be the top left of my browser. Take a look at that. If I do top 0, right 0, it's going to go on the right side of my browser. Okay, so it only cares about the browser. If I scroll down, you won't see it anymore because it's just going to stay at that position there. So you see the difference, right? So even though it's the same position property, this value here, the right hand side, there's relative versus absolute, makes a huge difference. I'm going to go ahead and move it down a little bit more so that, not that one. I'm going to move the top, just going to move it down a little more so it doesn't affect my stuff later. I'm just going to move it there for now. Right? That makes sense. So if I do top 200 pixel, right 0, it's going to go. All right, you must be wondering about the fixed div. This is the last one here. My fixed position here. Let's go ahead and add this one here. Position fixed. Okay. Position fixed is actually very similar to position absolute in the sense that if I do top 0, left 0, where does it go? Oh, same idea. It went to the top left of the browser, right? However, there's a little bit different. One thing that's different from fixed is literally fixed, meaning if I scroll, it's gonna stay there always. So if you've seen those ads on the websites that follow you around and that are freaking annoying, that's how they do it. It's position fixed. So actually, one benefit of knowing this kind of stuff, sometimes if these things really annoy me, what do? I just open it up. Right? Oh, we haven't talked about inspect yet. Okay, we'll talk one day. Oh, hey, I see position fixed on here, right? Bye, right? It's gone. Right? And then now I can just browse without ads. Or at least, the ad's still going to be there, but it's not going to follow me around, right? And I can scroll like normal person now. Right? Without it being annoying. Yeah. Because that's like the only way, position fixed is the only way you can create that effect. So it's got to be a position. Yeah. Good question. Yeah, that's actually really hard. But let's talk about styling this a little bit. Yeah. So fixed div, you could totally, just like any other div, you could still add, we could add a width on here, right? Like maybe a little bit bigger. I could even add a height on here, let's say. Right? Like there you go. This is like a total ad, right? Following you around. All right. Right. And, oops, I put 0 px. It should be px. Right. Right. Yeah. And so the question was, how do you center stuff like this? It's actually really hard to center stuff like this. You could do like, horizontal wise, you can still do your margin right, margin left, like auto stuff, I believe. Oh, no. Oh, never mind. It doesn't work on this stuff. Yeah. There's actually there's not one solution is my answer. We have to look this up a little bit. But you can do stuff like you can try to manipulate a little bit by doing like left 50%, for example, and then and it's not quite right, but somewhat there. Alright, so you can try like that. But there's no like one, unfortunately there's no clean like center, like text line center or something. Unfortunately there's not easy way to center. You're gonna have to fudge a bit with your with this. Wow, that's already really annoying. I'm gonna move this to the side because it's already annoying for me. I'm gonna move this to the bottom here. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller so I don't have to see it as much. There you go. Okay, so now you see it. So, and a key thing here with fixed, again, look at this fixed here. It's covering up all the text behind it, right? So again, these position values are able to cover things behind it, put things on top of others. Okay, all right, questions. Yeah.
You know how to eliminate the blocks or like gaps they left behind?
Oh, these?
Yeah.
You can't. Yeah. So if you might be able. I never thought about it like that, huh? Yeah. Yeah. So I guess if you want to do something like this, you got to put at the end or something. So you put this at the end, so that the blanks don't matter, the gaps don't matter. Any questions? Okay, so we're gonna do more with this. So let's do more with this. What did I save it at then? Okay, good. All right, let's try that. Okay, so now we kind of understand some basics of positions. Let's try it out with this. Let's add this to it. So something like this where we like to call these overlay effects. Like there's like this overlay on top of that shows on top of the image when I hover. So let's try adding something like this, learning what we just learned, like our position, absolute position, all that fun stuff. Okay. First of all, I gotta add these pictures in. By the way, you're gonna have to do the same thing in your assignment. You're gonna have to add pictures into these. You create these empty divs, and then you gotta put pictures in it. So let's scroll down. First of all, let's put some pictures in here, and then we'll add the overlay effect. If you scroll down, down, all the way down, all the way down. Image container. Okay, I actually have the images in here already for you. Go ahead and uncomment these out. You can uncomment them by I'm just deleting them here. Let's just delete this real quick. All right, so around line 122 or so, you're gonna see image container, and notice how the div has a class called image container, and in this div we have image 1. All right, okay, and then the second one we have image, another image tag, image 2 here. Let's continue commenting some of these out. Image here, and then image here. Okay, let's go ahead and save this. And if I refresh right now, holy cow, my images are ginormous, so they're like going all over the place. We'll fix this in a little bit. Okay. Alrighty. So I already gave you the code for images, just uncomment it so we could actually see these images. So this is kind of the same idea you're going to be doing with your assignment. You've created the divs already, right? For your gallery, all the divs you have, and then you're going to add an image inside each of these divs. Okay. But then of course right now the images don't like to fit in your divs by default. It's kind of annoying. We're going to fix that as well. Let's go back into my style up here. Let's just continue. Maybe just actually I have image container. Perfect, image container. Let's do it right here. So I have image container, and right below it, what did we do before? Typically I said hey, just do I've said before, you can just say, hey, all my images just fit the width of my div, and then we'll do something like that, right? So that's kind of what we did before. But there's some issues here because what is this? I set a height already to my pictures, so my image, there's this gap here right now, and then this is kind of awkward because I don't want to if I do height like 220 pixels or something, this is awkward too because now I've stretched my images, right? Sometimes we come into these very awkward, we don't know what to do with images sometimes. So instead of doing this, here's another trick I'm going to show you. I'm going to go and delete all that, so I'm going to make it all big. So yeah, sometimes image width 100% is going to work perfectly fine. You're going to fit if you need to fit. But here's another, this is showing you another way to work with images. Sometimes if you want an image to fit into a specific div, this is when it's useful. You could do something like this. You could actually crop everything that goes outside of this div. Okay, so image container is that gray div that I had earlier. If I do overflow hidden, this is an interesting one. Overflow hidden, we haven't seen this before. If I do overflow hidden, let's take a look at this here. Boom, whoa. This is our very, very, very basic way to kind of crop out everything. So my pictures are still inside my div, as you can see. So before I had my overflow hidden, let's take a look at this. My pictures were going outside my div. The moment I added overflow hidden, what I'm saying is anything that goes outside my image container div, my image container, just hide it. Or crop it out, I guess. Let's crop it. So that's one way to kind of work with stuff like this. If you have a specific div and you want to make sure it fits in a div, one way, an alternative way you can work with is put overflow hidden. However, there's kind of an issue here as well. One thing I kind of don't like is obviously I've cropped out everything, right? I only see the top. Maybe this is okay for a lot of cases, but maybe it's not. So another thing you could do with some of these images is like if you give like height 100%, let's say, save here. Take a look what happened. All right. So what happened? What I did is my image fits the height, and then anything left over. Let's go on. So my image looked like this. It was. This is really good for like landscape photos, where my image is really wide, and I want to cut off like the side here. So I could make the image height 100%, and then I can cut off any like of the overflow here. And now I kind of cut it out a little bit better. So that's one way you can kind of like crop images in a sense. So that's like again, this is one way. But sometimes this might not be enough. Sometimes depending on the image, the best way to do is you gotta just crop the image, not on the web, but you gotta use like Photoshop or something to crop your own images. But here's just like a technique you can crop. This I'm not really cropping, but crop images. There's a problem with this one though. This is a like a portrait image. So portrait images, they're really tall. So notice how like this image, the height is 100% here, but we have some leftover gray area. How do we fix that? For these images, we can identify a specific class. We can be like, hey, image container. I'm going to create a new class called width 100. And for this one, I'm going to say, let's give you width 100%. And let's leave the height like just, so what I'm going to do for like this is for my like portrait images. Okay. For my portrait images, I'm just going to make the width be as wide as the div. Right. And then if the picture goes below this gray div, we're going to cut off the bottom. So we're going to like cut off at the bottom and so that we can fill up this div space. So this is my portrait images. Portrait images, crop out the bottom, for example. All right, I'm going to scroll down to my Tommy Trojan. This is Tommy Trojan here. And for my Tommy Trojan and Tommy Trojan only, everything else looks okay. The first two pictures are okay. For Tommy Trojan, I'm going to add a new class here. I'll just kind of stick it at the back here. Class is going to equal with 100. Okay, cool. So I've stretched out the image all the way across. And then notice how now the bottom of Tommy is cropped though. Okay. So again, these are some techniques to work with images. So unfortunately when you do images like this, you can't try to position the image up and down. This is all you can do with overflow. Overflow simply crops. That's it. You can't like move the image around, unfortunately. So, anyway, all right. So just showing you that because you're gonna need it on your assignment. You're gonna probably need to use overflow hidden for this. All right, going back. All right, let's go back to the real thing that we want to do. What's the real thing we want to do? I want to add this overlay effect. I want to add this hover effect on here. Okay, so first thing. Okay, so what does this look like? I'm gonna create a div. And I'm gonna put a div on top of my image here. Let's scroll down here. Back to my thumbnails. And whenever you want to put things on top of other things, it's a good idea to kind of group them together. What I mean by that is this. So I have a div with a class image container, and then I have an image. And then right over here, right below it, I'm going to go ahead and create another div here. And I'm going to call it div class equals overlay. Okay, so this div here, I'm going to go ahead and put some comments here. This div will be the box that will Let's add some. Let's like add some like 1, 2, 3, 4. We're using some icons here. Okay. All right, let's add some icons here as well. In the file I gave you, in the folder I gave you, I'm actually linking to some fonts. Bear with me for now. Just gonna kind of copy this out for me. Copy this out with me. This is how I'm gonna add that heart icon. These icons, that heart icon and the comment icon. All right, span. There we go. Span class OI, and what was it called? OI, and then it was like data dash glyph equals heart. Let me make this bigger for us here. There we go. All right, in my image container, I have the image, the first image, the thumbnail, and then right below it, I have a div called div class overlay, and then this is the icon. The icon comes from a library called open icon. Okay. So this and then we'll do like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll do another one. Splat class OI data glyph equals comment square. Give you a second to copy that down, and I'll explain what the data glyph stuff is in a little bit. Okay. So these little icons you see by default, if you want to add icons on your website, typically you have to add like an image, like you have to find a heart image and put it there, for example. But I just want to show you a quick way to add icons really quickly on the web. There's this, in the starter file, I kind of gave you this access to this file called openiconic.css. So it's another CSS file, but it has it has fonts for you already declared. So as long as, back in my head, let's do one more thing in the head, back in my header here. This is we call this the icon, like the open, it's called open icon CSS file. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and put link here. Okay. Rel, style sheet, and then href, it was called open iconic. It's a folder in open iconic CSS, open iconic.css. Okay, so it's like this one. It's the I'm referring to this one CSS file in here. Oops, sorry about that. So it's the open iconic folder. In that folder, look at the CSS folder. In that CSS folder, you'll see open iconic here. So all this does, all this code does is kind of like Google Fonts. Google Fonts allows you to use their fonts. Using the CSS, we can now add icons into my website, like the heart icon, comment icon, things like that. If you're curious to see what other icons you can use, if you Google open icon, you could actually see all the different icons you can use. So let me just show you real quick here. There's a bunch of icons that you can use, right? A lot of different ones out there you can use, and they tell you how to use them. And then how I'm doing it, I'm just following their directions. So I'm back down in my span here. I'm putting like this data glyph. As long as data glyph matches whatever they're giving me on their that's defined on their website, I can add these icons. Anyway, this is not too important. I just wanted to show icons on my website. But let's go back to what we're really trying to do. Let's go refresh here. My overlay. Let me go ahead and see here. Okay. All right, where is my overlay? My overlay, actually, you can't see it, unfortunately, because it's getting cropped out right now by my image. It's kind of hard to see. But let's think about this. Let's kind of like ponder about this. All right, I have this overlay div, and I want to put it on top of my image here. Okay, so let's go back to my up into my style sheet. Where's my overlay? Overlay. Okay. Overlay. Let's give it a background color. I'm just gonna give it a background color black and color white for now. I just want to see it. Okay. All right, let's try position absolute real quick. I just want to see it here. Left 0. Where are you? Ah, there's my overlay. Oh, looking weird over there. Okay, let's give this like a, there it is. It's kind of hard to see, but there it is, right? There's my overlay right there. Okay, so I want my overlay. Okay, let's see. I want the overlay to be with 100%. Okay. Oh, that's really big. Oh, okay. Okay, maybe not. Okay, for now, let's leave it like this. All right. And then what? My overlay is way over there. Holy cow! But I want it to be on top of my image, right? Like kind of what the green things. Like I want it to be on top of my image, right? Like there's my position over there. Holy cow! That's okay. So that means using position. If I eyeball it, which seems like a terrible thing to do, maybe. Ah, hey, it's actually getting pretty close. Oh, hey! Oh my gosh, though, right? That's... So I could try to do... Oh, hey! Not bad. I could try to do that, right? Because that's what I want to do. I want it to, like, go over. I mean, I gotta change the width and stuff, but, you know what I mean? Like, that's... I could make... Just like that, I made it come on top of my image. But as you can see, that's such a pain. Who wants to do that, right? Who wants to calculate for every single one of them too, right? It's such a pain. And then you might think like, oh, what about like, can you do position relative maybe, right? Maybe that's like another. Oh, I don't even know where. Who knows where that went, right? Like, so there's like different techniques people try to do to like, set it. But obviously this way is way too long. Like you're just trying to guess and trying to put top. You're like guessing here. So here's a better way. Anytime you want to be a little more specific, anytime you want to create a bound, like hey, like instead of so when I do position absolute, the element is being positioned in relation to the browser, right? The browser's up here. That's why it's all like I have to put like 800 pixels. But instead, can I make it in relation to like this picture, right? Can I just do like hey, overlay, can you just go on the top left of this picture? Wouldn't that be nice? Right? Instead of top left of the browser, can we change the bounds? Can we change the relation to this picture here? Luckily we can. So that's what I'm going to show you. The last thing I'm going to show you is one more technique to use position. And I think this visual will be very helpful. So we did relative, we talked about fixed. All right, let's take a look at this. So when you can mix and match position relative and position absolute. If you have a parent element, a parent div, and set that to position relative, and then you put and when the children has a position absolute, it's going to now listen to it's going to change its relation from the browser to the parent. What I mean by that is this. Let's take a look back down here, into my thumbnails. So image container, I have a div called with a class image container. This image container is the parent of my image and my overlay, right? So I have a parent-child relationship between image container and overlay. So what I wanted to do is, I'm going to tell my overlay, hey overlay, when you position yourself, don't position yourself in relation to the browser. Position yourself in relation to your parent. I can do this. I can make it in relation to my parent. And it works out because the image right now, it has the same width as my image, the div. So this is going to work out. So what I'm going to say is, I'm going to change this a little bit. My overlay, you're going to be position absolute, but you're going to position yourself in relation to your parent, the image container. All right, so now if I go back up, so this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do that. Where's my image container? There's my image container, right? Image container, let's go and write some comments in here. Image container is the parent of overlay. Okay, so if this is position relative, overlay will position itself in relation to image container. Let's take a look at that in action. So if I'm going to add one thing here, position relative to image container. Okay, so image container again is the parent. It's important. An image is just image, whatever. And then in my overlay, now I'm going to change it to top 0, left 0. Okay, so I'm changing overlay to top 0, left 0. It's still position absolute. But now instead of it being going top 0, left 0 of the browser, it's going to go top 0, left 0 of its parent. Its parent is this whole div right here. So if I save this right now and I refresh, whoa, top left of my parent. Does that make sense? Let me review this one more time. So overlay has a parent called image container. Let's look at image container. By adding a position relative to the parent, which is image container, now I've restricted my child overlay, the rebellious child overlay. I've restricted it to be within my parent. So now when I do top 0, left 0, it's going to look at, hey, let's take the parent. Oh, my parent is image container, has position relative. It's going to stick top left now. If I do top right here, it's still going to be top right of its parent. Isn't that great? Okay, so it's never going to go out. Now it formed new boundaries. It's not going to position itself in relation to the browser anymore. It's going to position itself in relation to my parent. Okay, so these two are very important. So previously I didn't have like this. If I removed my position relative here, if I took it off, it's going to go back to being the top right of the browser. Okay. So the key thing is adding position relative to the parent, which is image container. Questions about that? All right, now let's add some styling on here. Okay, so now if I do width 100%, it's actually going to cover the 100% of my div here. If I do height 100%, same thing. Whoa, now it's totally gone. I could add like text align center, I think. Yeah, text align center. I could add maybe add some padding because this thing is way too much. Oh, that's a little too much too. Maybe 80, right? All right. And right now it's solid black. I want to add some transparency on here. Normally I would do like opacity 0.5 or something. Let's try that. Okay, so there's some opacity. Oh, that looks nice. All right. However, it's hard to tell on the screen here. But if you like really zoom in really well, you can also notice that each number here is pretty transparent, right? Like the opacity changes the text opacity as well. So that can be problematic here. So instead of doing this, well, here's one trick I can show you. All right, opacity changes the transparency on text as well. So instead of doing this, I'm going to go and comment out. Here's a trick I can show you. I'm going to go and comment out my background color. I'm going to do background color RGBA, like that, RGBA. Okay, so this is like an RGB values. RGB values are 000 is black, 000 is black. But that fourth value, this A, is the alpha level, so transparency level. If I put it 0.5, now the same thing happens, but now only the background color has the transparency. But the text itself is solid. It's still solid white. So the text doesn't get transparency added on it. we're almost out of time already. So last thing I want to do, I want to add the hover effect, right? That's the very last thing I want to do. So by default, I actually don't want to show this overlay effect. So by default, let's turn this off. Let's just call it like visibility hidden or something. Let's turn this off. By default, it's gone, right? By default, it's hidden. Right? By default, it's hidden. But when I hover over it, so let's take a look at this. Image container is my parent. When I hover over image container, okay, when I hover over that, go get its child overlay, and we're going to change the visibility to visible, just like this. So it's going back. Oh, there you go. And it's so important, so don't do this. So don't do this, like overlay, like it's tempting to do something like this, like overlay hover, right? Like when I hover over the overlay, like hide it or whatever. But you don't want to do that because let's think about it. Overlay gets hidden, right? So at this point, overlay doesn't exist. Like by default, overlay doesn't exist. It's hidden. So this you're gonna have some problems with that. So instead, add the hover. Whenever you're working with stuff like this, always add the hover pseudo class to the parent. So image container is the parent. It contains my overlay. So when I hover over the parent, then show its child overlay. Questions? Yeah.
How to add Dropbox?
How to add what?
Dropbox.
What's Dropbox? Oh yeah. So yeah, menu we didn't get to it. We'll continue this next week. So for your assignment, your assignment asks you to just do something with the menu. I'll go ahead and delete it off the requirements for now. We'll continue it the following week. So don't worry about the menu. But the menu is kind of the similar idea. Again, we're kind of running out of time. You can use like absolute position to do things like this, but we'll do menu next week. All right, so don't worry about menu for now. For now, just go ahead and add your pictures, and add hover effects on your assignment. All right. Okay, that's it for now. If you have any questions, I'll stick around. Otherwise, have a good rest of the week.